encountered in any phase of an IFR flight. Some departure procedures call for climbing in a holding pattern. En route, you must hold if you've not been cleared to your destination and have reached your clearance limit. On arrival, many approach procedures use a holding pattern for the course reversal, and all missed approaches end up in a hold. Holding patterns are as charted, or as given by the controller. For a hold that is not charted, the controller will tell you what direction to hold, the holding fix, the bearing or airway upon which to hold, leg length if necessary, the turning direction if it is left, and the expect further clearance time. The end of the inbound leg is marked by the holding fix. This may be a nav aid, waypoint, intersection, or DME distance. To begin, you fly to the holding fix. You should slow to holding speed at least 3 minutes before reaching this fix. Holding speed will vary by airplane, but it must not be faster than the maximum speeds published in the AIM for your altitude. Some holding patterns have different speed limits charted. The standard holding pattern uses right turns and a 1 minute inbound leg up through 14,000 feet, 1.5 minutes above 14,000 feet. Some holding patterns specify a DME or RNAV leg length instead of time. If you are holding at a VOR, start your outbound turn at the first complete reversal of the to from indicator. Start timing the outbound leg when either above or abeam the fix, whichever is later. If you can't determine when you're abeam, start timing when the outbound turn is completed. At 14,000 feet and below, use 1 minute for the first outbound leg, and adjust the timing on the subsequent outbound legs to compensate for wind to make the inbound leg 1 minute. Turns should be standard rate, but not more than 30 degrees. If you're using a flight director, the maximum bank angle is 25 degrees. Except when turning, you should compensate for the wind. Outbound, you should triple the wind correction angle used to track the inbound course. This will distort the racetrack shape, but keep you inside the holding pattern protected airspace. The protected airspace is not charted, but it is shaped somewhat like and centered upon the holding pattern. This puts about 60% of the protected area on the holding side, so the majority of your maneuvering should be there. How much airspace is protected? The FAA uses 31 different templates for holding pattern protected airspace to fit over 100 combinations of altitude, fixed to nav aid distance, and airspeed. The smallest size, used only up to 4,000 feet, is 6.7 nautical miles wide. Up at 46,000 feet, where the wind blows stronger and the jets fly faster, the FAA uses a pattern that is 57 miles wide. The miles of protected airspace are there to allow for dead reckoning on the holding pattern entry and on the outbound legs in a minimum 50-knot wind. This is not an excuse for sloppy flying in a holding pattern. Staying safe depends on compensating for the wind and following the recommended procedures. The FAA holding pattern entries are designed to transition you into the hold with a minimum of turning while keeping you in protected airspace. For the instrument knowledge test, you must know when to use the parallel, teardrop, and direct entries. On the flight test and in real life, you may use any method that keeps you in the protected airspace, and we'll cover some alternate entry methods in a minute. Flying toward the holding fix, look at where the outbound course falls on your heading indicator, or HSI. Divide the indicator into 3 segments, like so, for a standard right turn hold, and you can visualize exactly what kind of entry the FAA expects of you. Note that this visualization on the heading indicator is simply the FAA entry pattern diagram flipped and rotated so that the teardrop section is on the upper right. The teardrop section is the smallest, only 70 degrees on the right of the nose. At the fix, turn to a heading 30 degrees from the outbound course toward the holding side for 1 minute. Then, turn in the direction of the holding pattern to intercept the holding course. The direct entry section is the largest, covering a 180-degree arc. Simply turn right outbound and fly the pattern. The parallel segment is the 110 degrees to the left of the nose. Turn to the outbound heading. Correct for wind if known. Fly for 1 minute and then turn toward the holding pattern more than 180 degrees. Return to the holding fix or intercept the holding course inbound. Note that a parallel entry is only truly parallel in a no-wind condition. Many pilots prefer the additional precision afforded by tracking the inbound course outbound instead of the FAA's dead reckoning parallel entry. A non-standard holding pattern uses left turns, and the entry procedure diagram has to be flipped so the teardrop section is in the upper left. A rule of thumb can help you visualize the entry needed. For non-standard left turns, use your left thumb to mark the 70-degree teardrop section, and the remaining sections fall into place. Right turns, right thumb. There are also devices available to help determine the correct entry. These diagrams can be difficult to visualize in the cockpit, so some instructors recommend simply flying a teardrop anytime you can't use a direct entry. An old Air Force method takes the opposite tack and suggests flying a parallel entry whenever the direct entry isn't possible. Both of these alternatives may involve a little extra turning, but they'll keep you in the protected airspace and minimize mental math.